I'm not a superstitious person. I didn't believe in ghosts or demons until now. Yeah, stuff happens that can't be explained, but I want you all to know that it took more than a couple of flying spoons or a door opening on its own to scare me out of my job. Since the department didn't find any reason to keep this police report confidential, I will now detail everything that happened on the scariest night of my life. It started like any other shift. Me and my partner, Paul, were out on patrol when we received word from dispatch about a noise complaint in a small neighborhood. It was late, well past midnight. The streets were dead quiet, everyone long asleep, except for this one house. We pulled up in front, the house standing alone in the dark. The air felt heavier than usual. Nothing specific, just off. We knocked on the door, announcing our presence. Police. Is anyone home? It took a moment, but a little girl opened the door, peeking through the gap. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 10 years old, and she looked out at us with wide, unblinking eyes. "Hey," I said, crouching down to her level. "Is your parent or guardian home?" She shook her head slowly, her face completely blank. My first thought was that she must have had the TV on too loud, and maybe the neighbors had complained about the noise. Before I could tell her to stay inside and lock the doors, there was a loud crash of silverware from inside the house. The whole place was nearly pitch black, but the noise had come from the kitchen. My heart skipped a beat. The girl's blank stare told me she was alone, which made whoever, or whatever, made that noise an intruder as far as I was concerned. I asked the girl to step outside and turned to Paul. "Paul, why don't you give her one of those lollipops you like to suck on when you're nervous?" Paul shot me a cold stare, but handed her a lollipop as she giggled and followed him back to the car. I pushed the door all the way open, my hand instinctively hovering near my gun. "Police. If there's anyone in this house, please let yourself be known." I didn't have a warrant, and I didn't have any right to search the place unless I saw something threatening. But the house was too dark. I couldn't see a thing. I waited for any movement, any sound, but there was nothing. Frustrated, I walked back to Paul and the girl. "Hey again. I don't think we introduced ourselves. I'm Officer Mike, and this is my partner Paul. What's your name?" She stared at me for a moment before finally responding. "Maribel," she whispered. Her voice was so faint, I barely heard her. "That's a pretty name. So, Maribel, where's your family?" As soon as I finished asking, the television in the living room turned on at full volume, blasting static so loud we jumped. The girl didn't even flinch, but Paul and I were both startled. From the porch, we could see the TV screen flickering, casting strange shadows around the room. "Stay here," I told Maribel, leading Paul back toward the house. Against our better judgment, we stepped inside. The air inside felt thick, suffocating. We tried every light switch, but nothing worked. Flashlights barely cut through the darkness as we carefully moved through the rooms. I kept catching glimpses of something in the mirrors, just a person standing there, motionless. At first, I thought it was Paul, but every time I looked behind me, he was nowhere near me. I could feel something watching us. We weren't alone. As we made our way back to the front of the house, we heard footsteps, heavy, running footsteps, echoing down the hallway toward us. We both unholstered our guns, aiming at the source of the sound, but no one appeared. The footsteps grew louder and closer, but the hallway remained empty. And then things started flying. Lamps, chairs, anything not nailed down began to hurl through the air as if an invisible force was tearing through the place. We bolted outside, running for the yard as the commotion stopped, and then the police car's siren went off. I ran to silence it, my heart pounding in my chest. When I looked back at Paul, he was pale, his hands shaking. "You all right, Paul?" He pulled a lollipop from his pocket, unwrapped it, and stuck it in his mouth. "Yep." I opened the back door of the patrol car to check on Mirabelle. "You okay?" She nodded her head, her face still completely devoid of emotion. I closed the door and walked back to Paul, who was staring at the house. "I don't know what to make of this," he said quietly. "Yeah, me neither," I admitted, though I had a sinking feeling that this wasn't something we could explain away. "No. Seriously. Ignore the running invisible man for a second. Look at the family photos." He pointed to the house's walls, covered in framed pictures. "She's not in any of them." I froze. He was right. The photos showed a family, a mother, father, and 2 children, but Mirabelle wasn't one of them. She wasn't anywhere. "So what are you saying?" The footsteps led outside. Then the siren goes off. "What are the chances?" Paul's voice had that edge of nervousness he always got when he was trying to convince himself of something. "Are you trying to tell me Mirabelle is haunted? How else do you explain what we just saw? The TV turns on when we take her outside. Someone shows up in the mirrors but ducks away. It's like the house is alive." I wanted to shut him up. Not because he didn't make sense, but because he did. There was no denying the strange things we'd seen. "I know you saw it too," Paul continued. "It was prowling around, then it runs outside and gets in the car. I think a ghost is trying to get to the girl." I didn't know what to say. I stood there in silence until Paul, with that reckless determination of his, decided to walk back toward the house. "Paul, what are you doing?" "It only shows up in the mirrors. That's how we find it." I followed him reluctantly, my skin crawling at the thought of going back inside. Paul picked up a book from the counter and smashed the nearest mirror. "What the hell is wrong with you? That's someone's property." He handed me a shard of the broken mirror, his face set in grim determination. "It's not every day you get to arrest a ghost." We both aimed our flashlights around the house, shining the light into every remaining piece of broken glass, waiting for something, anything, to appear. I remember praying to God, begging him to not let anything show up. But something did. Out of the broken glass, a long, red, bony arm swung at me. I panicked as it ripped through my uniform, cutting into my skin. I fell forward, the glass shard shattering into smaller pieces around me. The thing continued to claw at me, its jagged fingers tearing through my shirt and into my flesh. Paul opened fire, and I heard the screech of the creature as it retreated. Paul helped me up, both of us breathing hard, adrenaline coursing through our veins. We ran outside, but when we reached the car, Mirabelle was gone. There was no explaining what happened. The department thought we were crazy. We filed the report, hoping the car's cameras had caught something, but they had shut off the moment we stepped inside the house. It was as if the thing, whatever it was, had turned them off while we were too distracted. But the girl, Mirabelle, that part, they took seriously. Our captain pulled up a missing persons report and showed us a picture of the girl we had seen. It was Mirabelle. She had gone missing months before, her family tragically killed in a fire that had destroyed their home. And now she was somehow connected to this house, this thing. A few days after the incident, I gave up the badge. I couldn't do it anymore. The rational part of me had crumbled, replaced by a gnawing fear that something else was out there, something watching. I've been trying to hold on to whatever little pride I have left, but it's not easy when every door creak, every shadow, every reflection in the mirror feels like it's trying to pull you back into that house. So, if you're reading this, listen to me. The next time a door opens on its own, or you hear footsteps when no one's around, check the mirrors. Because something might be staring back at you.